kick it off from there. So Denis, you want to kick us off?
So good morning, everyone. My name is Denis Pitcher. I'm the Chief Fintech Advisor to the Premier and the Fintech Business Unit. I'm overseeing a lot of the strategic direction of the island and meeting with the companies and trying to get a lot of feedback in the industry to figure out where can we go and how do we create an environment to leverage our regulatory expertise that creates a lot of the results that we heard about that the Global Fintech Advisory Board is hoping to see us achieve.
Hi, I'm Wayne. You heard a little bit from me in the last panel. I work with Denis in the Fintech Business Unit. And the Fintech Business Unit looks at the industry and the business from a couple of different perspectives. We have a business development role. We have an educational component. And we also assist with helping companies to just accelerate and expedite the process for getting set up in Bermuda, all of which is aimed to help us to create jobs, to be this wonderful fintech startup innovation island that we can be, and to really and truly make Bermuda and the world a better, fairer, safer place.
Hey all, I'm Pascal LeBlanc, serial entrepreneur in the blockchain space. I've been fully involved for the past 9 years now. As a matter of reference, I first jumped on board on Bitcoin at $40. So that gives a point of time reference for everybody out there. My two previous businesses were mining software acquired by NiceHash and a altcoin exchange acquired by BitCurex. And now I'm running that third startup called Mantle, where we've built a blockchain cloud with the vision of bringing closer the adoption of that new tech within the enterprise world and making it usable.
Hi, my name is Thibaut Verbeest. So you may believe I'm French, but I'm not. I'm Belgian, but I speak French. And so I'm a lawyer in the first place, and a tech lawyer, so-called tech lawyer. And over the last 5 years, I've been focusing massively on blockchain regulations and policies. And that's why you see that pompous title of World Bank expert. I advise the World Bank, some governments in Africa, mainly today, about blockchain policies, fintech and blockchain policies. Currently, I am a partner with a French firm, global firm, but I'm leaving the firm and joining a blockchain company in November, which is called DigiNex, headquartered in Hong Kong. And we will be listed on NASDAQ before the end of this year. So it's going to be the first actual blockchain company listed on NASDAQ. It's a financial group, actually, with also a technology division on blockchain. Very good company. And I'm also an entrepreneur, meaning that I co-founded a couple of blockchain ventures. And one of them is a Bermuda-based company, and Slick. And Slick is a very novel crypto mining business model that is eco-friendly and also embedding its own hedge fund, and also including AI in its business model, because we have the ability to switch between crypto mining and AI based on certain factors of profitability for the business. So I guess that's the future of crypto mining. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Saqib Wasim, Chief Innovation Officer of the Proof of Trust. The Proof of Trust is a globally patented mechanism that seeks to provide a new way to execute arbitration and dispute resolution for smart contracts. So as we see the growth of smart contracts, we also see the growth of dispute and friction between parties involved. And our technology seeks to provide a fair, transparent solution to these issues. We look at timing, cost saving, and fair, independent approach to these issues. Thank you.
So before we get started, what do we think about Pascal and Saqib's attempt at Bermuda socks?
Too short. You'd never guess which football team I support.
Yeah. He's got football socks, got dress socks. All good. Okay, so with governance and digital transformation, it's really a game of who's moving first. Is it the innovators? Is it the regulators? And traditionally in larger states, and I'm from Canada. I'll give a quick background myself. My name is Kerem. I'm a partner of a blockchain-centric consulting firm called Penrose Partners. So I've kind of touched all across the industries, work with governments, institutions, startups. And what I've seen usually the case in digital innovation is that entrepreneurs and founders are really pushing the limits and changing the way that we think, the way we work, and the way that we communicate with one another. And usually it's the role of the regulators to play catch up, and a lot of advisors that work with the regulators to ensure that the right policies, the right regulations are in place so that these entrepreneurs and these innovators are able to really push the boundaries and do the things that they want to do without being restricted. So the one first topic that we want to talk about, and I think it's very relevant to Bermuda and other small states around the world, is really the core of this big digital transformation that we're all a part of, and that's really going to come down to digital identity. Once you have a digital identity, something that you can carry across borders in different jurisdictions and really prove who you are, all the way down to your medical records, your driver's license, it's really going to change the way that we all work and communicate and travel and represent ourselves, whether it be personally, professionally, socially. It's really going to be a way that we have to find balance. So I'm going to turn it over to Denis to start, and then we'll all kind of go through that. But I really want to understand the importance of digital identity and e-identity programs for small states like Bermuda to really kind of be a flagship for the world to show how well it can work, how it can work, and hopefully other governments like Canada, US, and larger jurisdictions can maybe follow in these footsteps. So I'll turn to you, Denis.
Thank you, Kerem. I think digital identity is a complex topic. You have many trailblazers, or a few trailblazers, such as Estonia probably 8 years ago, and India most recently like 4 or 5 years ago, that created national identity systems that have acted as a showcase for what you can do with tech and how you can start integrating things like blockchain into it. The big challenge when we look at it from a Bermuda perspective or a small state perspective is that we're heavily reliant on other jurisdictions. So a simple example that I give is that if you think 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we're probably going to reach a point where when you go to your doctor every year for an annual checkup, you're going to have a lab and blood test done, and that information is going to be stored somewhere. And then when you end up in a hospital because you have an incident of some sort, that doctor theoretically will be able to go and pull up all of your records and see trends over time. I mean, this is the general direction of the access to information that we're getting. The big question for small states like Bermuda is what happens if you're traveling? Many Bermudians, residents in Bermuda, are sent off island for emergency care. What happens when you go to the States, you're in an American hospital, and they need to be able to access your information, and it's tied to a national identity, for example? If that national identity isn't compatible, then you lack, or that doctor lacks access to that same base information that they're used to, that they're comfortable with. And that's a big challenge, and I think that's the big narrative that's missing in a lot of the discussions about identity itself, is that we need to progress from just being purely about national identity to having interoperability, to have interoperability between jurisdictions, as well as between the public and private sector. We need to have more open standardization. We need to have the ability to have our information be transferable. And that's kind of driving a lot of the narrative to say, well, as much as, yes, we could turn around and solve base problems like compliance of like KYC or know your customer information, because it's a big pain point today, how do we be forward-looking? How do we make sure that whatever changes we put in place today will be valid in the future? And that's part of the big discussion that's happening right now.
All right, thank you. Anyone's got jump in, add anything to add, maybe from different jurisdictions in your experience, Thibault?
Yeah, from a European perspective, digital identity, what we call self-sovereign identity, is a very important issue because it relates to privacy. So the way we see it in Europe, because it relates to privacy. And in Europe, and that's just between you and me, and there's a frustration in Europe about digital economy because in Europe we have the sensation, the feeling that we have lost the internet battle. I don't like the expression because it's not a war, but you know what I mean, is that all the tech giants are from United States, North America, and not from China. And so in Europe, we try to make a case with privacy towards those tech giants. It's part of the agenda in Europe. And so with that attempt to reverse the power balance between those tech giants and European economy. And GDPR, the famous GDPR, the privacy regulations is part of the strategy. And so that more and more people will be in control of their privacy instead of sharing their private, life with those tech giants. And that's what makes them so powerful, is the data coming from the privacy of people. So it's not just a legal question, it's a political question also. But ID and digital ID, now seen from an emerging countries' perspective, like in Africa, is different. It's not about privacy. People do not actually care about privacy. They care about having an identity, period.
Yeah.
Period. And the World Bank has made it very clear that digital identity was a priority for the African continent, because you have millions, hundreds of millions of people without an identity. And it leads to many situations which are extremely undesirable for those people, including forced labor, including slavery. It's very easy to put people in slavery when you don't have an identity. And that's why a company like Diginex is actually launching now digital identity solutions, or a platform like EMIN, which is to combat slavery, because everything relates to digital identity at the end of the day.
Thank you. So, Kib, you want to hop in?
Yeah, just to add some thoughts to this. Whilst we focus on protection and digital identity, assurance of information is wholly important to this whole arena as well. Ensuring that we have accurate information that's vetted and correctly stored is something that needs to be carried out fully as well as we take pertinent steps forward in this arena.
So just quickly, what role does zero knowledge analytics and insights play in this, and protecting data and getting the right information out and being able to kind of balance that, right? So Sakib, Pascal, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah. I think Thibaut made a great segue. With the title of the panel, which was governance and the cloud, and he mentioned privacy, and Denis here mentioned kind of the interoperability. But this is like a three-step with interoperability being the last one. Like there's three problems in getting those cogs rolling, and interoperability would be the third one of that, and privacy is the second one. But then you have the data ownership. So it's like data ownership, data kind of jurisdiction or legislation, and then you have kind of the data authorization, like who has the right to see what and how is that data managed, just like the big data management kind of bucket. And I think that the first problem to solve before even those two, because if you have those two figured out, you still won't be able to roll something decent or even to experience with it. But if you start with the first one and then iterate towards the other, you'll be able kind of to get through that innovation process and validate hypothesis. And one of the important problem is that you have that data that should be owned by somebody. Is it the company? Is it the person itself? But then, it's digital data, and at the end of the day, it's ones and zeros, it's bits stored somewhere, right? So
that medium, that hard drive or that magnetic tape, whatever, for that USB key, whatever format it has, like somebody owns it, because like at the end of the day, those bits, those ones and zeros, they are physical stuff in the physical world. So they have location to it, and they are under some jurisdiction. So having like a missing technology piece that I see that is required to just even get to those kind of second and third degree problems is to have kind of data storage that is distributed in a way where you don't need that. It's on 1,000 USB key, it's on 1,000 different hard drive, and you only need any 200 of these to recreate it, and that, you know, the only way to recreate it is through the control of the ownership. Because let's face it, if you store something on the cloud, the cloud giants, they cannot access it. And encryption is not a key, because you know, it's been proven that security by obscurity, that's called, is just like hiding your stuff. Hiding your stuff is not secure. Just like digging a hole and putting your cash there doesn't make it safe, right? It just makes that people don't know where it is. Putting in a safe is something safe, right? So that's kind of the equivalent of being in the cloud and saying, yeah, I'm gonna encrypt my stuff. And that's one of the reasons why even today, cloud technology for storage of big data, and Kerem said it with zero knowledge, it's like still that issue that is trying to be figured out. And I think that piece of technology that allows you to have your data dematerialized, even in the bits, the ones and zero out there, will allow for those use cases to be kind of legitimately implemented and, you know, considered on important data such as personal stuff and governmental operations.
I'd like to add to that, and the important points brought up about privacy and custody of data, and having assurance of that data. These are all considerations that governments need to take into account when we're looking at how do we create the right regulatory frameworks. I mean, you look at GDPR, and as much as it's done to attempt to improve the management of our personally identifiable information, it's increasingly creating siloed sources of data. As an example challenge back to the medical record example, when you have a lab test done, you have so much additional information about yourself captured and stored. And that data is a tremendous risk to have attached to your lab results, because I mean, that's really significant information about you that could have vast impacts for your ability to get insured or your risks for future health considerations, many different things. So when looking at it from a government perspective, it becomes a question of, okay, well, how do you manage the custody of data, like what Pascal was talking about? How do you provide the right regulations around ensuring that companies are following best practices for storing data efficiently and not creating these siloed honeypots? And then, of course, having the assurance on top of that to know that you can rely upon that data in the future, that when you're going and having a lab test done, that only your lab results are being stored, none of your personally identifiable information is directly linked to that, but it can be requested by a doctor on your permission when you end up in a hospital in that scenario that you need it. So how do we provide the right regulatory environment to allow the industry to innovate comfortably to solve some of these really pressing world challenges?
So to me, it sounds like digital identity and creating proper data regulation and the infrastructure to support it ultimately is going to lead to protecting citizens and help ensure that their health is kind of first, right? Because, you know, I think as governments, it's really important to take care of your citizens, allow them to grow and explore the world, but also be safe in this manner, and also be able to have control over these records, have control over your health, because at the end of the day, without our health, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, then, you know, we're not able to be creative. We're not able to do business. So I think this is the first big pillar that we want to like lock down and move forward. The second quick topic I want to talk about, and I'm going to turn this to Wayne, is the role of digitizing currencies for a government or for a jurisdiction. I know there's been a lot of different stable currencies that have been launched, and you know, there's a lot of questions around it. How do the economics work? Is it something that's going to be accepted by the government, by merchants, by people? And so I just want to know, you know, some of your thoughts on the importance of creating this digital currency to replace potential paper currencies, and who you think is responsible for this. Is it central banks, commercial banks? Is it the government itself? So I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So I'm actually going to turn this one over to Denis, but before I do so, I'll just say that the government has a role, as you said, Kerem, to take care of its people and to look after its people's best interests. But I look at the benefits of this kind of initiative, and I want to come back to some people in the world believe in a borderless world, and that the world belongs to God or a higher power or Mother Nature, whatever each individual wants to call it. America doesn't belong to America. Australia doesn't belong to Australia. I'm a world citizen. I like to travel. And one of the opportunities that, and I remember last year when we were doing this, and it's strange how things evolve. We started with the concept electronic ID, and now it's become digital ID, and now it's become a digital strategy. And it's just like back in the day when STOs were the sexy word a couple of years ago, and ICOs were cool, and those are kind of like profanity or bad words today. We're not allowed to use those or say those words, but this provides the opportunity for ease of travel. If we can just, you got to get visas, you got to, traveling the world becomes problematic, and how do you know who you are? And you go to Russia, those old James Bond movies, your papers are not in order, those kinds of things. I think a proper electronic ID or digital identity strategy can make for a borderless world. The other piece is data, and who owns data and who has the right to own your data? And should the individual be in charge of their own data? I'd like to think the answer is yes. I'd like to be the manager, the person in charge of my own data. And there are companies around the world who empower individuals to take charge of their data and be paid for it. But with regard to the specific question that you asked, I'm going to segue into Denis, because that's the initiative that he's working on. I think he can speak to it a bit more intelligently than I can do so at this time.
Thank you, Wayne. I think the challenge is looking at the nature of money and understanding that there is a global conversation happening amongst legislators and regulators in what the impact of this new technology is for both this new kind of crypto, Bitcoin hype that we've had, and the potential to reinvent money in a decentralized fashion that's global. The introduction of Libra and the potential for a new kind of basket currency that can be used as a reserve mechanism introduced by the private sector, and then the digitization of traditional fiat currencies, so done traditionally by central banks. There's so much discussion happening around the world, it's really hard to know what the path of the future really is, because it's fundamentally the technology enables new things. It allows us to lower costs and increase access. You look at the German Bundesbank, and they've come out and said, well, central bank digital currencies have a lot of risk. Central banks aren't really geared for building software. They're not really geared for interacting directly with consumers. Meanwhile, China's looking at launching their own because they have a top-down approach that says, you know what, they're perfectly fine governing the whole system. The German Bundesbank really looks at it from the perspective of commercial banks are best placed to digitize money. The IMF produced a really great report back in July outlining the future of digital money and looking at the different classifications and categorizations, and basically coming forth and suggesting that synthetic central bank digital currencies, so basically supporting private sector issuers of digital fiat or digital dollars, in the case of Bermuda or the States, is a reasonable path forwards. How it'll all play out, we don't know. But I think the role that governments like Bermuda have is in finding a way to facilitate a lot of the direction of this industry. And it's actually something I have a column out, I think, today, talking a little bit about this, in what the possibilities are. Because it's not just looking at the global conversation of money, it's what can you do with it? Regardless of the technology and how it's applied, it's all about solving problems. How do we make our lives easier? How do we provide greater access? That's what matters. That's what the conversation for most people needs to be about. Not whether or not it's blockchain based, not whether or not there are newer technologies or new hype. It's how do we change the narrative? How do we provide access? So
Thank you, Denis. So
turn it over to...
someone want to hop in real quick?
Yeah.
Last one, guys.
You have your question?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go on.
So, whenever I hear about kind of stable coins or, fiat-backed crypto, always make me smile a little bit and makes me think of gift cards, right? You have an Amazon gift card or a Walmart gift card, and did they create a US-backed digital currency, right? And then the only difference is you can redeem it at Walmart. And then what if whenever you trade, like, let's say Starbucks start accepting Walmart credit cards, because Walmart could accept Starbucks credit card. Like, are we talking about a stable coin or not? And then, like gift cards, I'm not even going the reward sector with like air miles and stuff. Like, just with that in mind, another thing I like, just wandering around and share with people is, let's say you're back at Walmart and you both have in your pocket a Walmart gift card, some cash, and your MasterCard, and your debit card. Okay, so you have those 4 choices. Are they the same US dollar you're spending at Walmart? So the thing is, there's 2 important concepts, right? You have the payment channel and the payment denomination, the currency. So all those are different channels that are linked to the US dollar. So his having that one more channel different, is that much big of a game changer? And do you need central bank or regulators' approval to get those things rolling, as the tracks for gift cards or MasterCard or PayPal-like software are already traced? So that's my piece of food for thought.
All right, guys. So I'm going to wrap it up there, but just as like takeaways from that, I think one really important topic was the creation and management of personal data and digital identities and how we can innovate. And I think the direction we're going is a form of decentralized cloud that I'm hoping you guys create for us soon. Hopefully you're working on it. And then the second big point is talking about digital currencies and how that can apply to governments and the state to actually have something that can reduce costs of minting and burning and all these different expenses that go along with managing paper money. And I think we're in a position where maybe in the next 5 years, we might not see cash around and it might not even be accepted. I know in Toronto, there's a lot of places that don't accept cash anymore. And so, it's showing that, and I think this will feed into a little bit of the topics later in the day is, how can we reduce our, carbon footprints? How can we have a better impact on the planet? And I think starting to get rid of some of these, cumbersome, very expensive, old, processes is really going to help us move in that direction. So I want to thank all the panelists for your contribution to the panel, and I think we got some